Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird. Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Episode 289 of the See You on the Other Side podcast. Welcome to the See You on the Other Side lockdown. But I tell you, it doesn't have to be a negative thing, and we're still having fun no matter what. And we're going to try to lift everyone's spirits today by telling the happiest ghost stories we know. And so today, of course, joined by Wendy from the See You on the Other Side podcast, as well as Scott Marcus from whatsyourghoststory.com. And
hello.
My sister, unfortunately, Allison Jorlin. And so,
well, she's quarantined up at the ice planet Hoth, it looks like.
That's right. Things are going great over here. You know, we're just ripping open animals and sleeping inside of them, just like, normal.
Yeah.
Nice and cozy.
Yes.
Right.
Nice and moist.
When you guys were looking for happy ghost stories, to talk about today, did you find it difficult at all to find like ghost stories that were fun or happy or anything like that? Does it seem like most people, the stories they tell about ghosts are scary, or did you say there's plenty of happiness to go around?
Well, I want to just say that I consider all ghost stories to be happy, and here's the reason why. So amidst all the foibles and, the tragedy and the travesty, if life goes on in some way, that's happy, right? If people escape this mortal coil and go on to an afterlife, that's happy. I mean,
unless the afterlife is not such a nice place.
Well, okay. It might not all be like unicorns and sunbeams and rainbows, but it's life. And where there's life, there's hope. So if there's an afterlife, I'm all good. Even if terrible things happen to you in life, if there's a continuance and if you learn from something from it, I think it's a positive.
Oh, that's a really nice way to look at it, Allison. Different religions too seem to have like some afterlives. Of course, heaven's the big one that obviously everybody wants to go to heaven because it's an eternity in paradise. But then other afterlives, like the Greek Hades, always seem like a downer. You kind of go there, everything's great.
But they had the Elysian Fields, right?
Right, for the heroes. So it would give some, people a reason who wanted to die in battle or whatever, get to go to the Elysian Fields. But Scott and Wendy, when you guys were looking for ghost stories, did you find it easy to find happy ones?
I do think that's pretty easy. I've got the LA Hauntings ghost tour. The Hollywood American Ghost Walks. And I feel like the vast majority of the locations, especially along Hollywood Boulevard, are really positive stories because they involve people that loved a place in life and they want to come back to it and keep enjoying that place. We'll get into detail, of course, but like Valentino alone, he is seen at like a dozen places in LA, another 6 in New York, and another 1 or 2 in Italy. And his dog haunts the Calabasas Pet Cemetery. And so this is a guy that died young. So yes, we kick it off with some sadness, but we got to break some eggs. But he was a partier. He loved to go out and socialize, and he's been able to continue to do so after death. So I think that's super positive and fun to talk about.
And you're talking about the actor Rudolph Valentino, and people might recognize him from what blockbuster mega hits?
Oh, The Sheik. Everybody. The Sheik. What was it? Dance of the Seventh Veil? Something like that. I can't name more than... Oh, there's the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Everybody's heartthrob, Rudolph Valentino. I mean, still even the Bangles were singing about him in the 80s.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was... And, his most iconic character was the Sheik. And he was the biggest, one of the first male sex symbols. And that is why we have chic condoms, because it's named after this romantic character from the 1920s, back in the silent era.
Yeah, we can thank him for those ones that break all the time.
Oh, come on.
Allison's like,
I was
come on,
go
they always
a
work for
different
her.
way with that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Wendy, did you find it hard to find some happy ghost stories, or did they just pop off the page for you?
Well, I found that it was actually easy to find like fiction ghost stories for children that were happy.
Okay.
But not so easy to find actual experiences people had with ghosts that were like, made you feel good.
Okay.
So
Okay.
maybe it's just more fun. Maybe people prefer the stories that are spooky, or I don't know. But just in my searches of the internet, so that doesn't mean
Sure.
there aren't plenty of other positive experience things. And I've certainly met people at conferences or, the places on my ghost tour and things like that, where people tell me they think a loved one that's passed has visited them, and, they've experienced hearing or seeing things, and those are always kind of touching and positive.
All right. Well, let me kick off the story today with a happy story of a first-hand account that I got when I was visiting Puerto Rico in December of 2018. And the only tip that I got about this particular location, which is the Gallery Inn, which is on Calle Nazgare, and it's right on it's right on the ocean. It's overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, overlooking this big field over the ocean. It's really a beautiful place. It's in Old San Juan, and it kind of looks nondescript on the outside. And I saw somebody like in a San Juan, Puerto Rico employment forum post something like the dishwasher said it's totally haunted. So that was all I'd gotten about that particular location. And so I wanted to go in there and see if they did have any ghost stories. And so immediately you walk in, and what was funny about it is that I thought it was a statue of a parrot. It was this gigantic, the thing must have been 2 feet high. I thought it was just this parrot on this tree, inside this veranda. And I'm like, oh, that's a pretty cool statue of a parrot. And then it's like, hello. And it started talking to me. And I'm like, all right then. So it was a real parrot. So just to go over, it originally was 6 intertwined townhouses that were Spanish military residences built in the 1700s. And so they eventually just became regular houses. But an artist, Jan D'Esposo, bought the place in the 1960s. Now, she was born in Connecticut, but she spent time in Puerto Rico as a young girl with her uncle, who used to work for their governor, Luis Munoz Marin. I always say it wrong, but they named the airport after this guy, so he's Puerto Rico's most famous governor. And she returns there in the 1960s with her husband, Manuco, and they work for a long time to renovate the place. They turn it into a hotel that has art in every room. And so that's why they call it the Gallery Inn, because there's art, unique, sculptures and paintings and stuff like that in every single room of the place. And
So no Velvet Elvises.
no, definitely that is not a place for Velvet Elvises. That is for sure.
Darn. Okay, I would love a room with a Velvet Elvis, just to go on the record.
Well, maybe you can request it. And they can do that for you in advance. Anyway, the hotel bar is called the Cannon Club, and it really is a quirky, one-of-a-kind place. And the ocean view is spectacular, and it's pretty sweet. And so, even though the building is 3 centuries old, most of the ghostly activity isn't from the Spanish soldiers, but from Manuco, the deceased husband of the owner of the inn, Jan D'Esposo. She's still alive. He never left the building because his ashes are still in his old office. They're in an urn, I think. They're not just ashes out everywhere. But when we talked to the bartenders at the Cannon Club, they mentioned that they've seen him in his former office sitting in his chair. And they thought it was weird that, they're like, is somebody in there? And then they walk in and there's nobody in the office. So they see him from outside the office sitting there, and then they walk in, he's not there. And there's a piano in the bar in the Cannon Club. And sometimes the people hear music when there's nobody playing the keys. And they think they're in the other room. They're like, oh, you hear the music? Somebody must be playing the piano. And they go in there and it's nobody playing the piano. But they say the usual footsteps, shadows, and the feeling of not being alone come along with the job description at the Gallery Inn. But nobody feels threatened or scared because Manuco was a popular and friendly guy when he was alive. And they think that he's just checking in on the building that he worked hard on, and he shared it with the love of his life for 50 years. that they had worked there. And I thought that was a really happy ghost story. And I was excited walking in, because you never know when you talk to people that work at a place, like what they're going to say when you say like, hey, is this place haunted? Or like, I heard there's ghosts here. And the two girls working at the bar that night were they were like super excited to tell the stories. They're like, oh yeah, someone's going to believe us finally. And they talked about seeing Minuko through the place and how they always thought he was a nice guy when he was alive, and he was always friendly and a beloved character. And so they enjoyed seeing him after he was gone. And even his wife had seen his spirit in place a lot. And they said that she felt comfortable with him there, that he was just coming in for a visit and it wasn't anything scary at all.
That is a really positive story, that, he's lingering in the place that he so loved in life. So it makes sense. And, now that you talk about that, Mike, I mean, I have a lot of stories in Milwaukee that are like that. Like, I'm thinking about the Milwaukee Public Museum, for instance, and they are haunted and have been for the last 50 years by their former director, who was the director of the Milwaukee Public Museum from 1959 to 1969. And he was a very, exciting, interesting, idiosyncratic kind of character. And he's still experienced throughout the building. And not because of, some terrible thing that occurred there. I mean, nothing terrible happened there. But after his death, he just came back to this place that he loved in life. And he was quite a prankster in life, and he's still a prankster today. So I love stories like that where people seem to live on and, continue to express their personality.
Sure. No, I think it's great. And I thought it was really cute that the girls were excited that we wanted to talk about it. They were probably also really excited because I had bought a whole bottle of wine, and so they're like, all right, these guys are going to be here for a while drinking.
So we'll fill his head with a lot of stories.
Yes, right. But it worked, and now I've got a story that we can tell people on the tour in Puerto Rico. All right. Well, who wants to tell a story next? Scott, you had teased us earlier with stories about Rudolph Valentino, and I think we want to hear more about the famous L'Auvert.
Oh, well, let's see. I mean, I guess one of the more, popular and famous ones involves the Knickerbocker Hotel, which is on Ivar, just less than a block north of Hollywood Boulevard. And this place has its incredible history. There's a lot of darkness and sadness there as well. But gosh, where do you even start with this place? One of the places that makes this an important location just in the history of all things paranormal is that this is where Bess Houdini held her rooftop seance on the 10th anniversary of Harry Houdini's death, trying to make contact. So that will always be just an important part of spiritualism here, history. But yes, Valentino would be seen in the lounge of this hotel, and it was said, much like a Resurrection Mary in the south side of Chicago, that you could dance with him all night long, maybe not even realizing that you were dancing with this famous specter. And the funny thing is that in life, as the story goes, he would ride his horse down from, because, obviously the great romance hero rides a white horse from his home in the Hollywood Hills down to the Knickerbocker Hotel to then have martinis and tango the night away. But it said he would get so sloshed on martinis that he would eventually just slump his body over his horse, and the horse, being the best designated driver in the world, would walk home as he's passed out on his back. So an interesting thing, though, is that Valentino, he passed away early from some internal stomach complications that he went into surgery and didn't come out of surgery. He died before the Knickerbocker was built. So there's no way that he could have actually been dancing here in life. So we wonder, is the story taken and accidentally moved from a different hotel that was popular at that time? Or is it true that he is still dancing here in this location, which is now like an apartment complex and a retirement community, so you can't really go in and explore, except that there's the best restaurant in the world on the first floor, and that is actually where the lounge used to be. So you can actually still go to the place where Valentino is seen. But is this a place that Valentino, it opened after he passed away, and Rudy was like, well, I have never checked out over there, so let's head this way and see what the vibe is like. So maybe you can still visit new places after death too.
Oh, nice. Well, and if it's the greatest restaurant in the world, obviously he wants to give it a nibble. Okay, we had a couple of comments from the Peanut Gallery. Bart says we only hear the bad ghost stories, and it's nice to hear some positive ones. Hi, Bart. How you doing? Bart is a proud See You on the Other Side podcast Patreon member. So shout out to B-Art.
Woohoo.
And
Woo.
rock on, my man.
Yes.
And Stephanie says, awesome, it's ghost story time. How you doing, Stephanie? She used to be the Milwaukee Ghost Tour Guide.
All right.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh yeah, Stephanie. Yes.
yes, so it's nice to have a visit.
Yeah. And I'm hoping to get her back this summer.
That'd be great.
She's awesome.
And she is awesome. So, Wendy, you have to tell a happy ghost story next?
Yeah, well, I guess there is a happy-ish ghost story from the Waukesha tour
Yeah,
that I do.
happy-ish. Doesn't have to be perfect.
But actually, before I get to that, I wanted to just point out that, first of all, I love ghosts that play instruments, like the piano you were talking about, because
Yes.
that does conjure a nice feeling of someone, even in the afterlife, continuing to do what they love to do.
Unless they're playing the theme song to Westworld, which is super depressing. So if they play that from the Beyond the Grave, you don't want to hang out with them. And so,
Or
but you're-
Baby Shark, because they're just trying to kill you. Then they're pure
That's
evil.
torture. That's just, that's not
Yeah.
right.
It's cruel.
It is cruel.
So where are you going to haunt, Wendy, and play? You're going to haunt somewhere and play a drum
I was just
set?
going to say that, if anyone has trouble sleeping at night because they keep hearing random drum solos, just saying.
Well, that reminds me of the Natatorium in Amarillo.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one, actually.
So we were driving cross country, and the Natatorium, it used to be this public pool, but then it got floorboarded over, became, I think, a roller rink for a little while, but then it was ultimately a dance hall and concert venue for like the big band era in Amarillo, Texas. And today it's an antique mall, so it's just like chock to the brim with old crap, basically, for people to buy. And there's all sorts of activity at this place. But one thing that happens, which I so want to experience this, is in the middle of just clear out of the blue, and I can't imagine how much people jump, but they'll hear a drum solo emanating from the stage. And I think maybe, I don't know, you'll have some company in the afterlife.
That is unique because you do hear a lot of stories about the phantom piano playing.
Sure.
And I've heard of violin music also. Another place we visited where there's a grave site with a monument of a young girl holding a violin. People claim at certain times you could hear violin music near there. But the drum set one I thought was especially unique.
Yeah. So shout out to Chelsea, another Patreon, who
That's
is the
right.
person that gave us the lead on Elmwood Cemetery in Centralia, Illinois.
Yes, Violin Annie, the statue that is there. So, but yeah, just getting back to the stories of people either remaining in their daily routine, kind of just as a friendly presence. There is a ghost story from Waukesha that people report seeing at a bus stop, a woman who she's waiting for the bus basically, but they'll see her and then, kind of look away and look back and she's gone. And there hasn't been a bus to pick her up in that short amount of time. So, and it kind of coincides with a story of a woman who was killed near that area that was a regular at the bus stop and just kind of a friendly presence, just continuing doing her daily thing. And so people see that specter from time to time.
Allison, you had a pretty happy story from the Miller Caves in Milwaukee, didn't you? And
Yeah,
I remember when you got this story, wasn't that one of the days of the Chicago Paranormal Convention in like 2015? Like you had gone to the Miller Caves in the morning and then you'd driven to...
Yes. I had that story for a long time though, but in 2015, the people at Miller embraced the history and did a little video and even did a paranormal investigation that night of the Miller Inn and the Miller Caves, which is in downtown Milwaukee. And it's a place where people regularly tour. And there are these caves, these limestone caves in the complex, which used to be used from about the mid 1800s to 1906 to house beer and keep it cold when they didn't have modern refrigeration. So these huge limestone caves were used for refrigeration. And back in 1955, one of our former big newspapers here, the Milwaukee Sentinel, had a special edition just for Miller, just for the 100th anniversary of Miller Brewing in Milwaukee. So in 1955, they have this special issue, and it had all these stories about Miller and Miller history. And one of the stories was a famous ghost story that took place. I didn't know at that time when I just found the newspaper article that it was still taking place. But so I found this article and I thought, wow, this is such a lovely bit of folklore. And it's so, it's a love story. And so it was just irresistible to blog about for Valentine's Day on my Milwaukee Ghost blog one year, back in the 2000-aughts sometime. I blogged about it. And the story, here's how it goes. So there was a young brewery worker working at Miller, and he had this paramour, this girlfriend. And during one hot summer...
Listen to you, Paramore. What are you writing?
I know, right?
Novel here?
Yeah. Well,
Her
we were talking
breast.
about Valentino, so I got to bring out the vocab, right? So anyway, this brewery worker has this lover who is this, beautiful young girl. And every Saturday night during one hot summer, they have a tryst where they will meet in front of the Miller Caves. And they will use the Miller Caves as their love palace. So they were frolicking amidst the
Getting down
cast.
to the F cave.
And their affections bloomed and sparked in the lantern light. And so they were just having a great time among these huge casks of beer. And, maybe some of the cask leaks. I don't know. There could be a little bit of a leak there, just to keep everybody lubricated. I'm not sure. But anyway, they had a great time in the cool air of the caves. And so they used this as their little love palace for the summer. But then one Saturday night, the young girl is waiting patiently outside the cave, and her lover doesn't meet her. And she's waiting for hours and hours. And she returns home only to find that he has been in a terrible accident. She finds out that he was working one day in one of the caves, and he tripped and fell on one of the staircases and hit his head. And so, of course, she ran to his bedside, and he would never regain consciousness. So it doesn't start out happy, but, where there's a ghost story, there has to be some death. So then he dies, and she's at his bedside. And the old-timers would tell that she actually would die soon after as well. That winter, she passed due to a broken heart.
That is sad.
And so this was the story that they would tell about this terrible accident that occurred at the brewery in the Miller Caves. And then they said, soon after those deaths, they would see that subsequent fall and summer, they saw this woman in white, a luminous figure. They would glimpse her sometimes standing in front of the Miller Cave entrance on Saturday nights. And
Are you sure
So
they
I
didn't just
thought-
see the lady from the Miller High Life sign?
Sitting on the
who's
moon?
Yeah, I
on
know,
the
right?
moon or whatever.
Yes, but ghostly and in white. So anyway, this was the story. And I was like, oh, that's so charming that, there's still this woman waiting for her lost love. And it's pretty sad, right? But then what was happy to me is, well, first of all, I heard from the security guards, of course, after I blogged. They were like, well, stuff is still going on. That's a cool story and everything. But, oftentimes at night when we are doing our rounds, we will see figures. And one guard told me about, she saw a woman on her rounds, and she would hear that woman like speaking sometimes loudly into her ears. And there were other security guards who actually chased a male figure down the hallway one night. They thought, somebody had broken in. So what they tried to do is head him off at the pass. So one security guard was chasing this so-called intruder, through the hall and towards a door. And then on the other end of the door was another security guard waiting, and that area is all fenced in as well. So they thought, well, we've got this guy cornered. But so the security guard that was chasing this guy saw the door open, and the security guard on the other side saw the door open, and then there was no one.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, that was pretty fun. But my favorite is that other employees who help run the tour had told stories that after the brewery tour, they are, just making sure that, all the tour guests get to the Miller Inn to have their complimentary beverages and leave the cave area successfully. And at one point, one witness actually, she was an employee there, and she quit her job after this because she spotted a couple in the corner macking on each other. And she was like, oh, hey, guys, the tour's over, this way to the inn to have some free brewskis. And then they disappeared in front of her eyes. So it's possible. And there are enough reports now
they
that
have to be dead if they're from Milwaukee and they're passing out free beer in order to disappear. Like, that they're obviously dead.
They're obviously dead. But, the cool thing is that it seems, these stories seem to point to the possibility that these two ill-fated lovers have found each other again in the afterlife and still frolic through the Miller Caves and do what they will. So I think that's a pleasant story.
Some 40 and fornication.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that, but they sure do like to kiss in the corner. So I think that's kind of sweet. And it's interesting to me because at first, like sometimes when I find stories, I can watch myself go through different reactions to the stories. Like initially when I found it, I was like, oh, this is some cool like folklore. And it's great that Milwaukee has this type of folklore, just like other cities. It's kind of legendary, kind of sweet and sappy.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wait a second. There's something being experienced. And I thought, well, maybe it's residual because of all the limestone and the stone tape theory. And perhaps like some of what happened there is encoded
Their love
in
was
the
so
rock.
intense.
That's the stone. Right. That's the stone tape
Right.
theory. That it's just replaying like a record. But then when
Well,
you
that's
hear...
not like a record. That's like a porno.
But when you hear about the security guards and their interactions, and it seems like communication attempts on the parts of the spirits there, then it doesn't seem residual at all. It seems like an intelligent haunting. So my mind has changed about what's going on there, and it seems to be maybe two intelligent spirits, again, lingering in a place that they loved in life.
That's sweet.
Right.
Together.
That is a happy story, Allison.
Had to go through the sad to get there, though. But
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like somebody had to die, obviously.
If you're going through hell,
Right.
keep going.
There you go.
That's right. And maybe you get heaven on the other side. You know, I've got a pretty happy story from Madison. And this one I think is interesting, specifically because it's from my my high school social studies teacher. And it's funny because I was looking for some different ghost stories of North Hall of the University of Wisconsin. And I'd gotten a couple ghost stories about North Hall from like the 1800s. And I'll tell that in a second. But then I was looking through like the University of Wisconsin magazine for like the alumni magazine. And they have like readers could send in their own ghost stories. And so one of the ghost stories is from a security guard. And as I'm going down, it says like Tom Sabatke. And I'm like, whoa, Sabatke's not a very common name. And that's the name of my high school's teacher. And so I looked it up. Absolutely, it was from him. And so I just thought it was an interesting thing because he never sounded like he was interested in ghost stories when we were probably in American history class because it probably just didn't come up. But the fact that he had his own ghost story and that he got it into the alumni magazine, I thought that was a lot of fun. So let me give you a little background on North Hall. It was the first building at the University of Wisconsin, and it opened up in 1851. The famous naturalist John Muir, the founder of the Sierra Club, lived there in 1860 while he worked his way through college as a young man. He even describes his first botany lesson under a tree outside this hall as the inspiration for what set him, quote, flying to the woods and meadows in wild enthusiasm, unquote. In 1880, North Hall was a men's dorm, and strange figures were said to have been roaming the halls for years by that point. In the student newspaper that year, it mentions a student waking up in the middle of the night in his second-floor room. As he entered the hallway, he saw what was described as an apparition in white. He ran back to his room to grab his roommate, but when they went to investigate, there was nothing there. Later, when they fell back asleep, they both woke up when they said it entered their room for a moment and left. And after that, the ghost was seen in different buildings on campus over the next few nights, skipping through the halls and vanishing, and wearing garments of unearthly whiteness. I thought that I was unearthly white, right? But I guess not as much as this guy. And so after that, John Bascom, and the hill that actually North Hall is on is called Bascom Hill. This is before it was called Bascom Hill. He hadn't had anything named after him yet. But John Bascom was the university president, and he decided to get together some faculty and investigate themselves. So the president of the university did a ghost hunt.
That's cool.
In 1880. But a little after, a student named Samuel Whitney Trousdale had confessed that he was the spirit dressing in a bedsheet and romping through the halls. In addition to being excellent with bleaching his whites, Trousdale would later go on to become one of the most influential Methodist ministers in Wisconsin. But when you look him up, you have to go to the Wisconsin State Journal in 1888, and he talks about his, quote, ghostly confession, unquote. So when we get to my teacher, we'll go back to March 1983. And so we're getting the Wayback Machine. March 1983. Allison, you were 13 at the time, so you probably did you have a jean jacket yet?
I don't know. I don't remember a lot about that time. Mike.
Did you have a perm yet?
I'm sure I had a perm. I'm sure I loved
and
Michael
of course, I'm Burt
Jackson.
Reynolds. Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And Burt Reynolds. She was a big fan.
Burt Reynolds. I never liked Burt Reynolds.
March 1983. Now, the security officer is making his rounds at around 3 a.m., obviously the devil's hour, and he sees a heavy fire door open by itself when there's no one there. As he continues down the hallway, he feels like someone's traveling with him. The air's moving, the temperature drops. And he said he used to work at Wendy's.
yeah.
And not our Wendy's, but Wendy's with the hamburgers or whatever. And he said that he said the temperature drop was like being at the meat locker at Wendy's.
Wow.
And so, right, so that's a serious temperature drop. At first, he's afraid to tell his coworkers about the experience. But when he finally actually tells somebody from the maintenance crew, and he kind of coaches it as, have you guys ever seen anything, weird around here? He said they were all like, oh yeah, so you've seen the ghost now.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
They told him it was a political science professor who died late one Saturday night of a heart attack in 1956. He worked in room 412, and sometimes he's seen following the workers down the staircase if they leave his office door open. After they're done cleaning or whatever, they've seen him come down the staircase and have to go back up and close the door. Or they saw they see him walking through the hall past the custodians mopping the floor. So the next night, my teacher, this is a security guard in 1983 when Allison had a perm, was working in North Hall again, and he approaches room 412 and he says, "It's just security, professor. All's well. Good night." And he said he never had an experience that was scary again.
That's awesome.
What's funny is that in the letter to On Wisconsin Magazine, he even writes in, he goes, "I would sign an affidavit to this story's veracity."
Wow.
So, right now, you can't even get people to, attach their name to
Right.
something when they see a weird light in the sky. He's like, "I will sign an affidavit to its veracity." I mean, probably because, he's not worried about losing his job, because I think he's retired. I think he's retired now.
Well, that's when the
But,
good that's when
I
the
just
good
thought it
stuff
was
comes
funny.
out, though. It's
That's
always
right.
after people
You got
retire.
to talk to your elders.
There's nothing to lose, so
Yeah. Your elders all have the great stories, and they remember history. So talk to your
There you go.
elders. You have a lot of opportunities to do that now.
I just thought it was interesting. I just thought it was funny that looking through, I'm like, oh my God, that's my teacher. And then the funny thing is, I think I Facebook messaged him or something, and I saw him again that he was having some kind of because my old social study teacher, he was the head of the teachers union in McQuantigo where we grew up or whatever. And so he was a little to the left of Chairman Mao. And I saw him Facebook arguing with one of our past guests, Scotty Roberts, over some political thing. And it was just it was a really fun, I mean, Scotty's such a nice guy. They're both really nice guys, but it was just a funny thing that they knew each other. They were actually having a very civil discussion on Facebook, which I was surprised at. But the fact that my old teacher had a ghost story and knows a guy who we only know through ghost stories and paranormal stuff made me feel that it's a small world after all.
It's a small world after all.
And you were criticizing Baby Shark earlier.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm going to torture you people. Okay, so I have to interject here, though. I have to tell a story about John Muir that's supernatural and positive. It has a very happy ending.
Ooh,
so
all
you're
right.
talking
Let's hear about it.
John Muir, who's a very famous conservationist, and he originally came from Scotland, but he grew up.
Laddie,
Yes,
I'm
he
here to
grew up
conserve some
in-
birds.
He grew up in Wisconsin and became kind of this cool, weird inventor guy. He reminds me of Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. Some of his inventions,
All
he
right.
had an invention that would wake him up in the morning by catapulting him out of bed. That's actually an
I want
invention that is described through animation in one of the Wallace and Gromit cartoons. So that's when I picture John Muir, I picture Wallace. Anyway, so he would live in Wisconsin for a while and go to the University of at Madison. But then he left, of course, for the Sierras. And he is quite famous for getting Teddy Roosevelt to establish the national parks by getting him to go hiking and camping with him.
They had to have an
in the
arm wrestle off,
Sierras.
didn't they? Can't you just imagine Teddy Roosevelt's like, sure, I'll do it, but you got to beat me in a set of fisticuffs.
That's right. But anyway, John Muir was a big Scottish guy, so he was ready to put up the dukes. You know what I
Right.
mean?
You'd like a Glasgow kiss, would you, Teddy?
Yes. So they understood each other, kind of like Klingons. But anyway, so he was in his first summer in the Sierras, just walking amongst the trees one day, and he got this message in his brain just out of nowhere, something that had never happened to him before, that he got this message in his mind that his old professor was down in the valley and in distress. So he followed that crazy notion and just looked all around the valley, which is, a vast area, and then finds his professor, who was quite elderly at that point and decided to take a walk through the valley, but then, got lost and a little bit injured and dehydrated.
Aww.
And was wandering around aimlessly. And so he found his professor, his old professor from UW-Madison, and retrieved him and took him to safety. So, I mean, this was really bizarre to think that John Muir is just walking around among the Sierras and gets this psychic message beamed into his head.
Love it.
And then he went out there and saved his professor's life. This is actually in John Muir wrote about it in his biography. So it is a true story and a very weird one that he didn't know how to explain himself.
I love it. And that'd be great. We make sure we tell Lisa that one. So when she does the UW campus tour, she can also tie that into John Muir, who had a vision, the majesty of nature on Baskin Hill when he was sitting outside North Hall, eventually had a real vision that saved his professor's life from the University of Wisconsin.
Right. I'll send her that today after we get done.
The thing is that people don't understand about the University of Wisconsin is that all alumni are psychic.
Oh, is that true, Mike?
Yeah. So Wendy and I can read your mind.
Uh-oh. I better stop thinking about that.
I was going to say, Wendy, I can read your mind. So,
oh my gosh! Whoa!
We are no longer
Allison.
We are no longer friends.
Well, I do on the idea of helpful spirits. A short one. Joyce Heiser is somebody I know. She was the lead actress in Just One of the Guys, that 1980s kind of rom-com teen comedy, and she
I remember Just One of the Guys.
Yeah, Just One of the Guys. She was one of the guys, the kind of sort of guy, and she grew up in the New England area in this old house. And one day she was on the second floor, just on her own, and she heard a knock at the door, and it took her a while to realize that, oh gosh, I'm the only one home. I got to go answer that. So she goes running on this hardwood floor and slips on the top step. And she just banana peels as she's running down the stairs. Oh. And she said she finds herself literally upside down, falling.
Nightmare.
Assumingly about to break her neck. And she feels two hands grab her by the shoulders. Two phantom hands grab her by the shoulders, pick her up, and set her back down on her feet at the base of the staircase. She said a ghost saved her life. And so there are good protective spirits out there. We can say guardian angel, ghost, whatever you want to say. It's something paranormal saved her life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And I mean, that's the most comforting idea of all, I think, is that, just like in the spiritualist church, hey, and guys, the spiritualist church still exists. People just think of, spiritualism in the, 19th century, but spiritualist churches are still there today. And, they believe in lots of the standard Christian dogma, but they also believe that, these spirits of those who have gone before are still with us. And many other cultures, I was just in Hawaii, many other cultures share that belief that the spirits of our ancestors are still there protecting us. And still, watching you in the shower, unfortunately, but also there to save your life when you need it.
Sorry, Grandma.
Well, that's why you got to put on a show,
Yeah, right. They got to see something interesting. Come on, it's eternity, people.
I wanted to bring this up when Wendy was talking about haunted instruments, and this isn't necessarily a ghost story, but this is more of just something that I thought was neat. Was that at NAMM in 2016? NAMM is the National Association of Music Merchants, and they have a big convention in Anaheim every January, and that's where they show off the newest kind of music technology. In 2016, I went there and it had a modern update of a player piano. And it doesn't sound like a player piano like in the Old West movies. It was this beautiful sound, and the keys were moving and everything. And I even blogged about it on the See on the Other Side blog because I thought it was so interesting that what they did was there is a Canadian jazz pianist by the name of Oscar Peterson. And that player piano recreates 12 of his performances exactly like he was playing it in front of you. There's only a few of the instruments in the world that they built to do that. And so, like, they recreated his performance perfectly. They recorded him, doing a piece, and like how hard he pressed the keys. Every single thing was captured perfectly by the piano, and then it can play it right back for you exactly like how he did. So when we talk about the stone tape theory, recording something that, the walls can record things like a vinyl record. They've done that now in real life
with computers.
Right. So
cool.
when you're listening to that piano, you are listening to the ghost, a digital ghost of Oscar Peterson playing you one of his final performances. So you made me think about that when you were talking about it, because I was like, oh yeah, like the phantom drum solos or whatever, like we're going to have those. Think of all of the, think about all the, if Neil Peart ever played a V drum set, like they can go back and like the MIDI recording, it's a perfect recording that they can recreate on any other instrument then. And so that's something cool.
I always think the piano ghost stories are interesting too, because there's so many different ways of the piano like manifesting the sound. In some stories, people hear a full song being played, like up in Penbine where we were at the Four Seasons up in Penbine in northern Wisconsin, actually almost northern Michigan. There's a place that has a story about a phantom piano music being heard, and there is a piano, but what they hear is like, they hear music from the next room or in that room, but it's not, the keys aren't moving. So it's just the sound that's being like replayed somehow. And then in other cases, you'll hear of ghost investigations where they'll actually like see the key moving or something. And then in other cases, they'll hear the strings being hit inside the piano, but the keys aren't moving. So it's just interesting how spirits find a different way to to share that sound. Yes.
Well, speaking of a ghost investigation, Bart just said, he's like, automations and automatons are awesome. He's like the ones at Wisconsin's own House on the Rock.
Ooh,
now, I think
yes.
House on the Rock is a place where we should do a ghost investigation
that
sometime.
would be cool.
Yes. We'll get Neil Gaiman to join us, and it'll be awesome.
Right. All right. Who's got another happy ghost story for us?
Here, I'll do one more. This is from my book,
Please
so
do.
it's a Chicago area one. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Cavalry Cemetery in Evanston, but it is just one of the most beautiful cemeteries in I don't know, that I've ever been to. Shout out to Charles Comiskey, who founded the White Sox. He's buried there. But it is just a very grand, it's kind of like a Graceland Cemetery or a Rose Hill Cemetery, if you know the Chicago area, where it feels more like a museum of amazing history and just funerary art. But one person that is apparently resting there is someone that is not buried there. How? You may ask.
How?
Yes.
How? Do tell.
How?
So-
We're all asking.
In the area WW2, the Navy used Lake Michigan a lot for all sorts of different training exercises, since it is such a huge, vast body of water. Including, they would have these kind of makeshift, if you will, aircraft carriers out there to train pilots how to land and take off on that small of a runway. And I was able to verify that indeed this is something that took place out there at that time. And of course, you're training. Not everybody is going to stick the landing. And unfortunately, there were casualties. Pilots that are still in their planes interred in Lake Michigan. So for a while, after apparently one of these people passed away this way, people would see a spectral form of someone struggling out in the water, like they're drowning, they're trying to get help, and they would sink down, wouldn't see him, and then eventually he would reemerge, crawling up this rocky shoreline of Lake Michigan, and then he would walk up and across Sheridan Road, which is a 4-lane street, fairly busy street, and cars would stop or swerve to get out of the way, and then he would get to the gates of Cavalry Cemetery, and this was usually in sunset or later. So the gates would be closed, and he would just pace back and forth until eventually fading away. Well, as the story goes, this was a very regular occurrence in this area for a while after this person passed away, until one night the groundskeeper forgot to lock up, and he left the gates open. And the aviator, or Seaweed Charlie, as some people have nicknamed him, had never been seen since that time. Yeah. So he's never been seen since that time that the gates were accidentally left open.
Oh, no.
So it's like he was able to finally go into the cemetery and find his own peace.
Aww.
How many times though did he have to did he have to cross the road? So was it like Frogger? Imagine like crossing a 4-lane highway. Like every time he got hit, the ghost got hit, he had to go back to the sea and start again.
Oh, it is eternity, Mike. So
yeah, he's got nothing but time.
What's the rush?
No, that's like Tantalus. Though, no, that's like
Sisyphus?
Who's the guy that had to roll
Sisyphus.
the boulder? Sisyphus and the rock to roll it up the hill.
Well, he rolled it all the way up.
Yeah, he made it to the end. That is a happy ending because he finally, his torment or whatever of being stuck in the water, he finally got out and made it into his eternal grave.
And just from a theoretical standpoint, let's say because this could be folklore. Allegedly, there are scores of witnesses that have seen this through the years. Again, a while ago, but you think of ghosts like, well, they can walk through walls, and they're not bound by these physical limitations. But first off, we don't know the rules. We just think we're guessing here. But also, maybe there is something special about this consecrated ground, and if the gates are closed, well, that's a spiritual sign to just stay out for right now. But fortunately, he was able to get in.
Aww.
Good for him.
That's nice.
Bart also mentioned the Eastland disaster.
Yeah.
And he's like the Eastland that lost 844 passengers.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and I responded at least because some estimates have 888 or more. We don't really know because this was taking place in the teens. I'm a little bit fuzzy at the moment, but it was supposed to be a cruise ship that would take all of these company people and their families on this trip to Michigan City, Indiana, and it was a very long, narrow steamer. And as people were getting on, you're releasing ballast to try to keep the boat balanced. And eventually, and we don't really know what it is, there's different theories, but for some reason, something happened on one side of the ship that got everybody's attention. So they all rushed over after a lot of ballast has been released. So the ship just rolled over right there while it was moored in the Chicago River, and not that much water. But a lot of people were below deck. And so, people that were on the surface, they maybe didn't know how to swim, and people passed away there. But untold hundreds of people were below deck, and then the ship filled with water, and they could not get out. So, yes, we have an unbelievable amount of loss of life in that one space. And it's really amazing because today people observe sometimes screams or, again, like residual hauntings of people asking for help from the water. One thing that I find fascinating is Harpo Studios. A lot of places were set up as makeshift morgues, and Oprah's Harpo Studios was one such place. And
before it was Harpo.
Before
Oprah was the first one who jumped in to save lives.
There we go.
Let's just be
what
clear.
What can't she do?
Oprah's like, she's like, you don't drown it. You don't drown it.
A
You
life
don't
preserver
drown.
for you. A life preserver for you.
You get a life jacket. You get a life jacket.
But she apparently, and I still need to find this, but she apparently did a Halloween special that talked about ghost stories, and they did an in-depth look at the hauntings there at Harpo, including what people would hear is hundreds upon hundreds of people slowly walking through the halls when no one was there.
Oh, no.
And it's theoretically a residual haunting, not of anybody dead, but of survivors coming to try to find this. We've strayed away from the happy ghost stories here.
We'll end on a nice feel-good story about the hundreds of people drowning and not being able to be saved.
But I remember hearing about the Harpo, like on the original Chicago ghost tour with Richard Crowe. Like he talked about the ghost stories at Harpo Studios.
Absolutely.
The Eastland disaster makes me think about the Lady Elgin that you talk about in the Milwaukee ghost tour, Allison, but that also isn't a happy story, right?
No. It's not a happy story, but I can reroute us. I mean, we never really talked about the Milwaukee Public Museum and their happy ghost story, which of course, admittedly starts out sad. We had our own Indiana Jones here before the character of Indiana Jones was even imagined. There was a man named Stephen Borhage. And,
Well, actually, I'm going to take that back. About that the character Indiana Jones was even imagined, because I think that Steven Spielberg said that he got the inspiration for Indiana Jones from a character that Charlton Heston played in like The Greatest Show on Earth. And the only reason I'm saying that is because
And what year was that, Mike?
Like 1951.
Okay. All right. Well, you may precede me then.
No, the only reason I wanted to say that, though, is I wonder if Stephen Borhage was also influenced by that film, and that's like Charlton Heston and the adventurer look and stuff like that, and that inspired him in his own life.
Unlikely, because he was a baron from Hungary, so he actually fought Nazis on horseback and was an avid fencer. And then later became an archaeologist and came to Milwaukee and was the director of the museum here from the Milwaukee Public Museum from 1959 to 1969. And he had a thick Hungarian accent and was quite an unusual character. He was like our Indiana Jones in a way, because he would travel all around the world retrieving artifacts for the museum. And he also had a lot of idiosyncrasies about him, like upon meeting a woman, instead of shaking her hand, he would elegantly kiss her hand. And he would also...
Don't do that for the next couple of weeks, folks.
Yes, no hand kissing or...
Face touching.
Social distancing, people, social distancing.
Right. Don't give them the old Miller Caves greeting.
Yes, he would kiss their hands. He would also, instead of wearing a winter coat, he favored wearing a long black cape that would stream behind him. So he was a very interesting personality, and everybody really loved him at the Milwaukee Public Museum. And even though he was a baron, everybody just, he's Baron Stefan de Borhage, but everybody just called him Steve. And
Hungarian barons. They're just like us, right, guys?
Right. So everybody just called him Steve, and he was a joker. But then... unfortunately, fate intervened, and he died in a car crash on his way to work in 1969, September 26, 1969. On his way to work, he perished in a car crash. So that's not very happy, but soon after his death, his ghost was experienced at the museum. And at first, he was experienced on the elevator, where the elevator was mysteriously returning to the third floor where all his collections are housed, or the fourth floor where he had his offices. So it seems like he has this supernatural work ethic where he keeps returning to work. But for him, it was a joyful place. And he also, as I mentioned, would play pranks on people. So the security guards will often report, hearing like laughter from the third floor mezzanine. And they will sometimes report smelling pipe smoke, which he was very fond of, wearing tweed blazers and smoking a pipe and looking very professory, as you did at that time. And but they'll also see a dark figure rushing by on the third floor wearing a long black cape. And there was actually someone who was a contractor at the museum who was contracted to make a replica of a stone Mayan wall. And of course, that took a lot of work. I mean, to fit the fiberglass in such a way so it would be a good model for the incredible Mayan stonework of history. So he was putting those stones up, and he got to the last stone, and he was just so happy to stand back and survey his work that he left and he took a little break, and then he came back, and that stupid final stone was on the ground. And he was like, well, maybe I was a little hasty. I'm going to take some more time with it, make sure I really get it affixed in the right way this time. And then he was happy with his work. It was, the end of the day. He left for the night. He returned early in the morning, though, before the museum would open to make sure everything was just as he had left it. And, of course, he found that final stone on the ground again, at which point he screamed out in just consternation. I mean, he was really upset that for some reason that final stone would not stay affixed. And as he did that, he heard this uproarious laughter coming from down the hall on the third floor mezzanine. And of course, he thought that maybe it was one of his co-workers playing a prank. And so he marched off looking to give this person a piece of his mind, but it wasn't any current coworker anyway. He went around the corner and he saw this shadowy figure in a long black cape laughing at him. And as he stood there, paralyzed with fear, watched this figure this figure turn and pass this ornate gold case with golden artifacts in it. And as this figure passed the corner there, he saw it dematerialize. And, this is something that this person will remember for the rest of their lives. So, certainly something is going on there. Other security guards have reported that certain motion sensors will go off, and they will follow the motion sensors as they trigger, and then of course nobody's ever found triggering those motion sensors. So apparently Borhege is still with us, and still with us in such a way that he likes to get people's attention and play pranks on them and have a good laugh. So even from the beyond, he's out there enjoying himself and spending more time in the institution that he built and loved in life.
All right. Well, way to turn that around, Allison, from the countless death in the Oprah studio to
Thanks, Bart.
An exciting Indiana Jones-ish Milwaukee ghost. So good job.
Right. Life goes on.
Yes, I'm bringing that around. And I think that takes us to the end of our Happy Ghost Stories episode. And now if people are interested in hearing some more of Scott's stories, where can they find that info, Scott?
Whatsyourghoststory.com is the best place to go.
And Allison, if people want to read some of your writing, I mean, if they really want to, where would they find you?
Well, I mean, they can definitely take one of the American Ghost Walks tours when they begin running again. But they can find my writing on the Mysterious Universe website, but also watch some videos. I've been places. I've done videos. I put them up on YouTube, and I've also done
she's
interviews.
done videos.
Hey, I've done videos. Thoughtful videos, Mike. Something you should try once in a while.
All right, fair enough.
Dusting off that noggin. But anyway, check those out and check out my paranormal interviews at youtube.com/Mothman.
Ooh, that sounds like fun. And Wendy, where can people find our fun paranormal songs?
Oh, you can find them all at othersidepodcast.com. There's 288 episodes to listen to if you're bored, if you're sitting at home and curious about the paranormal. And every single episode has an original Sunspot song at the end. So you can check that out. Or you can also check out sunspotuniverse.com and find the full Sunspot catalog.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I hope that everybody has an awesome week. I think we should probably do this again before the lockdown ends because it was a lot of fun. And next time, we'll have a different theme for the ghost stories, and we'll bring you some more fun paranormal stuff from American Ghost Walks, and see you on the other side. Also, anybody interested in taking a American Ghost Walk, we know they're not running right now, and that makes Daddy sad. But they are coming back soon, and we got a deal right now that every Ghost Walk is $15.
What?
And that you can use them. Yes, unbelievable. Every Ghost Walk is only $15, and that even includes the locations that would be more expensive. But
that's a bargain.
The price in Wisconsin is $20. But if you get them now, you can use them anytime in the future and for any tour, anywhere that American Ghost Walks runs for $15. So just want to say that's kind of a good deal. And AmericanGhostWalks.com has a little thing that says buy gift certificates where you can find that. So Wendy, you had one more thing before we sign off?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if anyone has a happy ghost story that they'd like to share with us, and then we can share it next time. Or I guess it doesn't have to be happy, but if you have any unique stories of your own, that we'd love to hear them. So feel free to send those to us either through the See You on the Other Side Facebook page or us individually on Facebook, since that's where you're watching, or email us at show@othersidepodcast.com, Twitter @OthersideTalk. What else?
And of course, Patreons can tell us directly at the next Google Hangout.
Yes, which is coming up very soon.
Right. Yep, that sounds good.
Yeah, and we love all your ghost stories, be they horrible and sad or happy, because all ghost stories ultimately are positive because you learn something and you remember someone.
And they're fun.
I think ghost stories are positive because they show you that you will be remembered. You will not be forgotten.
Yeah, and connecting us to history is always a beautiful
Unless
thing
it's a
too.
ghost that wants to kill you.
Well, there's that.
Or
Wait,
if it's like a drummer ghost that's just playing drum solos in your ear all the time.
Well,
Either
there are
way-
exceptions to every rule.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for everybody who joined us in the live feed. We had a really good time talking for you, and we'll do it again soon. Check out Scott, what'syourghoststory.com. Wendy and I at OthersidePodcast.com. Allison, you can take her ghost to MilwaukeeGhost.com, and she wrote a couple of brilliant tours right there, and you can find her writing at MysteriousUniverse.org. And we'll see all of you guys on the other side. Ghost stories are often meant to scare and shock, and those are awesome, but they don't have to always be that way. As Allison said, ghost stories mean there's an afterlife, and when there's life, there's hope. So for this week's song, we wanted to play the heaviest, meanest song we could think of with the nicest lyrics we could think of. So here's Sunspot with Happy.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
Before we sign off completely, I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon members who make it possible for us to produce this show. And an extra special thanks to Dr. Ned, who is an executive producer of See You on the Other Side. He contributes to the Patreon at the level that he gets this extra shout every single episode. And we truly appreciate your support, Ned. And we appreciate all of our Patreon members. Thank you so much. If you'd like to become a Patreon member, please check out othersidepodcast.com/donate, and you can be part of the fun too. Take care, everybody, and have a great week.
You know they have to be dead if they're from Milwaukee and they're passing up free beer in order to disappear. Like, you know that they're obviously dead.